What's up, guys? It's fourth period on Thursday. We have a little over a week until the end of the quarter, and I'm going to post our final activity for the quarter, our CQA. It's going to be hopefully a way to sort of wrap up and recap some of the stuff we've done in class, some of the stuff we've learned from these videos, and just general practice on our approach. So here's what it is. I'm going to post this just now. I'm going to go through it to sort of explain my reasons. Again, I tried to make something fairly real and not like a sort of phony quiz that doesn't connect with our real activities. We have 5 scenarios, 5 things that are actual questions I've got, maybe tickets, or maybe sometimes people call me or send emails. 5 things that we've seen in this quarter that I'm asking you, how would you approach it? So if somebody gave you this question, what would you do? What would you look for? What would you try? What are the possible issues at hand? So, number 1. The teacher wants to clean the touchscreen on her active panel. The active panel is one of these new boards. I'm sure you've seen it in my room, or now pretty much every room, because we just got a bunch last week to replace the old screens with the projectors. She says it's smudged and it's not working. It's not looking good. So when I heard that, I thought, oh, maybe like kids were touching it with gross Cheeto hands or something, because normally it doesn't get too smudgy. I don't know. So what would you say if somebody came up to you and said, my touch screen, it looks bad, it doesn't work as well because it's got all these visible smudges on it? We've seen touchscreen info in some of our Professor Messer lessons. We've seen them in real life. You know them from phones and iPads. So how can you take your knowledge, look up a few things? You might look up, how to clean a touchscreen. What chemicals can you use? What can't you? I'm sure there are some that would mess it up. I'm sure there are some that are fine. What would you tell this person? So for this, you want to write about a paragraph. I don't just want like yes or no or just a quick sentence, but you would say, well, here's what I think. Here's what I would look up. Here's what I would say. Get into it a little bit. There's not one answer. This is not like an Encyclopedia Brown mystery where you're supposed to look for a clue in the first sentence where you're like, aha, this means it's exactly blah, blah, blah. This is for you to use your critical thinking. For example, if I said, one of the monitors on my desk went out, well, there's more than one possibility. Maybe the power got disconnected. Maybe the power's on, but it's not getting a signal from the computer. Maybe it is, but it's not displaying for some reason, etc. There are multiple possibilities, but your job is to think about what they are, what's most likely, how would you test between them, and so on. Number 2, a teacher says her new active panel works just fine. It's got the screen, the touch is great, but there's no sound. Okay, she's playing a video, and the sound is coming from the little dinky built-in speaker on her Lenovo desktop that is probably fine if you're sitting there, but definitely not if you're trying to broadcast it to the whole room. So what would you think might be the culprit there? Again, there are 3 or 4 main suspects, and what would you try, and how would you narrow down, what would be the main cause? Once you do, you can fix it in 2 seconds, but, how do you figure out which one of those things it is? Number 3, this one we used to get a lot with the old Chromebooks. I haven't seen it much recently, but I did see one this quarter. Student says the Chromebook is great, but the screen cuts out when it's at certain angles. So if you open it a little too much and it's this big angle, it's no good. Or if you tilt it forward a little too much, then the screen just cuts out. And then it comes instantly back once you tilt it 2 degrees more or something. So considering what you know about Chromebooks, and considering we've seen 3 videos in the Professor Messer series about laptops, what would be your guess and how we might address that? I know in real life you'd just say take it to the bookstore, but let's get into a tiny bit more than that. Okay. Number 4, student says a Chromebook works fine, but the screen is mega dark. The stuff is there. The info is there. It is getting your pixels on screen with colors, but you have to really hold your hand to shade and see ghost version. It's not lit up the way it should be. So what would you think about that? What's the problem? What's the fix, etc.? And then finally the last one. This is one we see a lot. Probably every week I hear somebody mention it, which is that a student says, oh, my Chromebook works when it's plugged in, but as soon as I cut it loose, it's like it was never there. It's just totally dead. And then when I plug it back in, I get the little startup. It's not instantly popping back, but it's like, giving you the little logos and booting up and all of that. So what would you say to that person? What's the likely culprit? What might you recommend, etc., etc.? Again, in real life, you just say take it to the bookstore, but give them a bit more than that. Imagine that they asked, or they asked if they could do something, or maybe if you had the power to do something, if you had a little bit of tools and you could pop it open and take a look. So that is our CQA. It's a lot of these are things we have seen or things we do see all the time in real life. So it's saying how would you approach that? And a lot of these are using knowledge. I'd say all of these are using knowledge from the Professor Messer videos we've seen. Even the ones that aren't laptops, we've seen laptop ones. It still involves touchscreens and sound and the same type of connections that exist. So take a look at that and take your time, okay? I thought about doing this as a Google form, but then I thought I don't want you to open it, type a few things, and hit submit. I want you to open a doc, type a few, and then come back later and make it better, add more, improve it. I might send it back, asking for changes, etc. Not because I'm being picky, but because I'm saying, hey, you know all that stuff that you do in your head when you think about it. Let's put that on paper to make sure we know what you're doing in your head, and we know that we can sort of work with it and improve it, but only if you make it explicit. That's our last thing. I put in some grades recently, I think yesterday, even though we didn't have class yesterday, for the Professor Messer quizzes, and anybody who did it was great. Some people got 8 or 9 or 10 on their first try. Some people didn't, and they did a second try. Wonderful. If you missed those, feel free to go back. You have no deadlines, really. Of course, I graded them, but you can do it later. And you have no limit on your retries. Feel free to do it again. And the other grade I put in yesterday were the February tickets. And so we did one for January. If you did some tickets, I gave you the points. If you didn't, I gave you 0. For the February, we missed so many days to snow and e-learning, and we didn't have as much of a chance. So if you did it, I gave you the points. But if you didn't, I left it blank. Okay, I'm really trying to be fair and lenient on some of these grades, so I'm not going to take off for February since there weren't many chances to come in. That's the plan. I probably won't add any more assignments, maybe a little bonus thing at the end, but this is the big one. This counts for the most. This takes the most time, so get a head start. Look at it today. You don't have to finish today. Maybe you look at 1 or 2 questions, think about it. Maybe we do some tickets in real life, and you go from there. Thanks. All right, I just ended